Hi, class. This is Peter Hanink, and this is my assistant Felix. And we wanted to talk about the first assignment, or the second assignment, I guess, but the first writing assignment, to talk about some general things that I noticed that a lot of people had problems with, and then to preview the next assignment. So, first off, for the writing assignment, I know there are 3 different ones, but I'm going to go through some things I noticed that were kind of through lines through almost all of them. So one of the biggest areas of confusion, I think, is Weber and what to do with Weber. So Weber does talk about, a big theme in Weber is rationality. But I think one thing you want to keep in mind is what does he mean by that, and what is rational and what is not rational. So Weber makes this distinction between substantively rational and formally rational legal systems. So to Weber, a formally rational legal system would be something like the civil law system that exists in France, where you have statutory law that the judge merely applies facts to. And that's the only thing that happens. Every single case, the exact same thing happens. Here's the law, here's the facts, match them up. It's predictable, it's logical. And Weber thinks that capitalist systems prefer that kind of a legal system because it's formal, rational, and predictable. This is what Weber refers to as elective affinity, saying that certain types of legal systems are going to be preferred by certain types of economic systems. Likewise, Weber thinks that the Protestant work ethic, which is present in much of Europe, is associated with certain types of economic systems, namely capitalism. And so Weber thinks that Protestant countries prefer capitalist systems and prefer formally rational legal systems. Now, Weber does think that what the United States and Britain have is still rational, but it is substantively rational. So it's rational not in the form of the civil law, the statutory law, but in the substance of the decision, because the decisions are made in a common law system as found in the United States or Britain through use of precedent by relying upon previous cases. So the rationality comes from matching up this case to the law, but also to previous cases. So that's why he refers to that as substantively rational. So I think I read a number of papers where that was kind of confused, and people were not quite clear on that. Okay, so next up, as far as Marx is concerned, one area that I think a lot of people had kind of difficulty understanding, or at least had trouble with, was false consciousness. So what does Marx mean by false consciousness? Or Marx never actually talks about false consciousness, but it's a Marxian notion. So false consciousness refers to instead of the interests of the proletariat being fought for, the proletariat end up taking on the interests of the ruling class, of the bourgeoisie. So the false consciousness, the reason why we call it false, is that the bourgeoisie convince the proletariat that what's in the bourgeoisie's best interest is also in the proletariat's best interest. So a great example of this in the Krugman article, which a lot of people wrote about, was Krugman's observation that the bourgeoisie, in this case the bankers, obviously what's in their interest is to get rid of Occupy Wall Street. But you end up having lots of people saying that Occupy Wall Street was a nuisance, and they were criticizing Occupy Wall Street. And these were normal people. These weren't rich people saying this. These were normal kind of people who had taken on the interests of the 1%. So that's what Krugman describes, and that's kind of a classic example of false consciousness. Okay, so the final thing is a lot of people, a comment I made for a few people was about page limits. So the Professor Thompson had said 3 pages maximum. So when he says 3 pages maximum, what he means is not that we're following any kind of hard and fast page requirement where if you don't hit it, you're penalized, and if you go over it, you're penalized. But that is a guide. That should give you a sense of about how much analysis is appropriate. And if you have much more than that or much less than that, then you want to think about, well, what am I writing that's too much or too little? So an example, if we, for example, take the Krugman piece, which again most of you wrote about, that if you think about a page, half a page to a page, summarizing the Krugman article and summarizing Occupy Wall Street, that kind of the facts of that, and then about a page to half a page talking about Marxian theory and the notions in Marxian theory, and then about a page to half a page comparing the two and matching the two up. That would be a good way to break down that. So, Felix, do you want to say goodbye? So Felix will say goodbye now. And I want to talk briefly about the assignment that's for next week. And the assignment that's for next week is, so a couple people have asked me if, or actually it's due in a few days, but a couple people have asked me what form it should take. If you have experience writing legal memos, a legal memo is perfectly fine. But if all you do is answer the kind of questions that Professor Thompson laid out in the assignment, that's also perfectly fine. Something to keep in mind is we're talking about torts. And since we're talking about torts, what we want to think about here are what are the legal requirements for a torts case, right? So what does the plaintiff have to prove? And so you want to lay those things out of saying, okay, these are the requirements according to tort law that a plaintiff has to prove. So therefore, that's the analysis that you want to apply. And I think if you answer the 5 questions that Professor Thompson laid out, that'll be a nice summary. But here again, Professor Thompson says 2 pages maximum, which means really no fluff. You have no room for extra information. You really want to stick to the facts as closely as you can and answer this question as efficiently as you can. So there's no room for filler here. This is the kind of flip side of page limits. I think that, in undergrad, oftentimes we think of page limits as something we struggle to reach. And then, of course, when you get to grad school, page limits then become, oh, I have to fit all of this in 2 pages. So it's a different kind of challenge. But I think that, obviously, if you only focus on the things that are most important and most specifically answer the question, you should be in good shape. All right. Thanks a lot, and I look forward to reading your papers.